Hi guys, welcome back to Code It. Today we're going to be talking about logical operators, specifically in Java and JavaScript, although I'll touch a little bit on how they can be generalized as well. So what are logical operators? So logical operators are used to combine conditional statements. So we have for and, the two ampersands, for or, the two straight lines, and for not, we have our exclamation point, which we also touched on in the Boolean statements video. So here's a cute little Venn diagram situation to describe kind of how logical operators work. So if we look at this first Venn diagram that says A and B, we're looking for the overlap between the two. Of course, if it's A or B, either one is fine. And if it's A and not B, then we only want one and not the other. So here's our example. We have x is equal to 10, y is equal to 5, and z is equal to 1. So our first if statement says if z is greater than 0 and x is greater than z. So both of those statements must be true in order for the if statement to execute. So we know that z is equal to 1. So 1 is greater than 0, so the left side is true. And then if x is greater than z, so x is 10, z is 1. So we know that x is greater than z. So since both of those are true, that if statement will evaluate to true, and then it will print this is an and statement. With the next one, we have if z is greater than 0 or x is greater than z. So we just know that both of those are true. So we know that that if statement is going to execute. Although only really one of those needed to be true in order for it to go ahead and print. But since both of them are true, it's still going to print. The third one says if not x is greater than z. So an important thing to notice is that the exclamation point is outside of the parentheses. So we'll evaluate the parentheses first and then evaluate it with the exclamation point, and then see what happens. So again, we know that x is 10 and z is 1, so x is greater than z. But we're testing if x is not greater than z. We had this exclamation point here. So this if statement is not going to execute since x is greater than z. However, if x was like -1, -1 is not greater than 1, and so it would print this is a not statement. So more on logical operators. So what we talked about earlier, this syntax is specific to Java and JavaScript. Other languages might use similar operators, different operators. Python, for example, literally uses the words and, or, and not. They don't use the ampersands, straight lines, and exclamation point. It really just depends on what language you're learning, and of course, be sure to check the syntax. I'm just talking about Java because that's the language I'm most comfortable with personally. So an important tool that we can use to evaluate when we're looking at logical operators is truth tables. So what you kind of do is you have your two variables filled out on the left side, and then you can evaluate each condition. So if we look at the first row, A is false, B is false. So if we look at A and B, that means that A needs to be true and B needs to be true. Well, A and B are both false, so this logical operator would execute false, excuse me. Next one is A or B, so either A could be true or B could be true, or both of them could be true. However, since they're both false, that one will operate to false. And then the last operator checks that A is false, so not A. This can be kind of confusing to understand this concept, but not A basically means if A is not true, which means A is false. So since we see that A is false over here, the not A operator would execute true. Again, with the second row, we see that A is false and B is true. A and B is going to evaluate to false because A is not true. In order for this one to be true, A and B must be true. A or B will evaluate to true because B is true. Even if A is false, that doesn't matter because you only need one for that or operator. And then again, since A is false, not A will evaluate to true. The second one, we have sort of the same thing, except A is true. Oh, sorry, the third one, we have A is true and B is false. Again, since they're not both true, A and B will evaluate to false. A or B will be true since A is true. And then not A, so since A is true now, not A is going to evaluate to false. Our last row here, A and B are both true. So A and B will finally get that one to evaluate to true. A or B will be true since you only need one of those for that OR operator to evaluate to true. Since we have both, it'll still work. And then not A is going to be false since our A value is true. The best way to kind of get a handle on these truth tables is to work through them yourself. You can make up your own variables, you can look some up online. It's definitely kind of a practice makes perfect situation here. Another important concept with logical operators is short circuit evaluation. So logical operators evaluate from left to right, just like our Booleans are true and false statements. Short circuit evaluation is when Java evaluates an OR expression if the left operand is true, so the expression on the left side of the AND or the OR, it won't even look at the right operand. So it knows that the left side is true and it doesn't even bother looking at the right side because it doesn't matter. Let me see if I can explain that a little bit more in this example. So here we see that X is equal to true and Y is equal to false. So this if statement checks if X or Y. Well, if X is true, it doesn't even need to look at the Y because since it's an OR statement, it only needs one of them to be true to execute. This saves Java some runtime. It doesn't have to look at as many data points, especially if you're using lots of Boolean operators in a long, complex program. So if X is true, we're just going to look at the X, and then Y is false. So even if we looked at the Y and it was true, we would still print. If the Y is false, it's still going to print. And so Java just checks out the left side of that operator. To review, logical operators include and, or, and not. They use a specific syntax in each programming language. And you can use truth tables to evaluate your logical operators. Java and JavaScript use short-circuit evaluation when evaluating OR statements. Here are my sources for this video. Thank you so much for watching. Follow us on Instagram at code.i.t and subscribe to see what we're up to next.